was supposed to be liftoff from the Kennedy Space Center. They were saying 95% chance of a go for launch, but now today's blastoff has been scrubbed. But since we have all of our eyes on Cape Canaveral anyway, let's start tonight with the great unifier of all mankind, all humankind, space, and what was supposed to be an incredibly important mission to the International Space Station. Because right now there's a lot that a lot of people get wrong when it comes to what's actually going on with those two astronauts that have now been up there for 9 months longer than expected. We, of course, are talking about the soon-to-be long-awaited return trip home for astronauts Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams, who are going to be returning to Earth in a SpaceX ship that's actually already up there. And their 10-day mission on another ship that turned into a 280-day trip to the ISS and counting, all in microgravity.
We came up prepared to stay long, even though we planned to stay short. That's what we do in human spaceflight. That's what your nation's human spaceflight program is all about, planning for unknown, unexpected contingencies.
We're living up here in this very unique place that gives you an amazing perspective, not only, out the window, obviously, but also just on how to solve problems.
Solve problems. That is the right stuff right there. Now, their original ride home, Boeing's Starliner, this one right here, that was brought back down to Earth without any astronauts on board after being plagued with helium leaks. It had some thruster problems, which left a whole lot of complications in its wake. Enter SpaceX and some earthly politics to sort through over whether this is, quote, a rescue mission to save Suni and Butch. And the answer is cosmically complex. So let's take some time to break all of this down for you. Joining us now is Marissa Para, one of our favorite people that we like to talk space to. But real fast, Marissa, before we get to you, the original ride here, Boeing Starliner, that was hooked onto the ISS for a little while. Then it came back down to Earth. There is a SpaceX Crew Dragon that is hooked up to the ISS right now. What's the latest situation?
Okay, so a lot to unpack, Gadi. And yes, you point out rightfully so that Crew 9 has been at the International Space Station, essentially parked for all intents and purposes since September. It's been docked there since September. So they do have a ride home, but they do a handover. They wait until Crew 10, which is the next crew, arrives. And so we were all looking towards tonight, thinking that this would be the night. And Gadi, it was supposed to launch at 7:48. It was around 5:30 that we first heard the first indication that maybe it wouldn't happen tonight. And it was looking too perfect, Gadi. In fact, suspiciously perfect. The weather was beautiful. There wasn't a cloud in the sky. We had 95% weather favorability. That should have been my first clue to start being suspicious, because we started hearing about a hydraulic issue, that there was something they were inspecting with the clamps that essentially hold down the rocket in place. That is before liftoff. So this is a ground issue that they were inspecting. We kept hearing that they were continuing to inspect it. They were holding off on making a decision. We were standing by. They said they were cycling the valves. And then eventually, finally, at 7:05, they officially announced they were going to stand down and scrub tonight's launch. And so we do have video that I think might have been playing, or might be playing in the next minute or so, of the crew deboarding, if you will. That's called egressing. And of course, all of us together waiting to find out when this launch is going to happen. So Crew 10 still scheduled to launch. We just don't know when, because this hydraulic issue still has to be settled. I mean, safety first, Gadi. Space flight, although it has become so routine, is always risky, and they always play it safe. They always play it very cautious. So they're going to want to make sure that the hydraulic system is fully resolved, fully cleared. But there are two opportunities. There's an opportunity tomorrow. We call them opportunities because we don't know if they're going to take it. 7:26 p.m. Thursday, that's tomorrow, and then 7:03 Friday night. So big question is, can they get to a place where they feel it is safe to launch these 4 different folks, again, a mixture of astronauts and cosmonaut, but we, of course, standing by to find out when they feel comfortable to announce when that next launch opportunity is, Gadi.
And if we could put that live shot up again, those are those astronauts getting into, I believe, yeah, those are Model S's, Falcon doors closing under a Falcon 9 rocket. The astronauts will get another attempt at this, obviously. But Marissa, as we see them now leaving the launch pad, and that stay gets a little bit longer for Butch and Sunny, if things do go according to plan in the next few days here, what's the timeline of them getting home? Because they're not coming down on the Crew Dragon that's going up, right? They've got their ride. They're going to climb into it in about a week and then maybe come down, splash down. How does that work?
It's a great question. So I'll just remind our viewers, for those who might need a little refreshing, because it's been a long journey. We were here when Starliner launched from right here at Kennedy Space Center. That was last June. And then, of course, as we have covered right here with you, Gadi, they did not return on Starliner, ultimately, again, erring on the side of safety, because Starliner, this was a test mission. This was the first time Starliner ever brought humans to the International Space Station, but they played it safe because of all the reasons we had reported at the time. Last August, Starliner returned to Earth without them. They remained at the International Space Station, and it was announced that Butch and Sunny would come back with Crew 9. So Crew 9 launched with 2 extra seats on board, essentially saving those seats for Butch and Sunny. They had to do a whole lot of rearranging to make that happen. So again, Crew 9 has been docked at the International Space Station. We say that again and again because there's a lot of misconceptions that Crew 10 is going up to bring Butch and Sunny home. That is not true. Essentially, they're passing the baton is the way I've been likening it. So let's pretend, okay, we do not know when the next actual launch opportunity will be. We know the window is tomorrow. If they were to take it, hypothetically speaking, then the next day, the following morning, is when Crew 10 would dock at the ISS. And then it would be Monday would be the earliest that Butch and Sunny, Crew 9, would start to undock and make their return to Earth. But again, all of that depending, it happens 4 to 7 days that we expect the Crew 9 to make their way back to Earth. That is, of course, depending on when Crew 10 arrives. So a lot of questions. I'm sure Butch and Sunny and all of their families, as we've been talking about, very eager because Butch and Sunny, they're consummate professionals. They are used to, I mean, at this point, it's been almost 9 months, but their family is obviously very eager to see them. So we're all eager together. I know there's a lot of excited people waiting to hug them and see them again after 9 long months, Gadi.
They sure are. And you know what? Third time's a charm. We hung out with you last night. We're hanging out with you tonight. Hopefully tomorrow we see another launch. Marissa Parra, we'll see you tomorrow.
Yes.
Now let's bring in former astronaut Danny Olivas, who I believe, if I have this correct, like you helped build the ISS at one point, right? When this launch does happen, how exactly does that handoff go down?
So when the new crew comes on board, there's a handoff protocol that has to be followed, essentially getting the new crew up to speed with what's going on the International Space Station, you know, issues that may be of concern, problems that they're working, where they are, status of different pieces of equipment. Also go through various emergency response, you know, get everybody acquainted with what you typically go through when you sit down, for example, like you get on a plane, you go through the emergency card and everyone understands what to do in the event of an evacuation. So they'll undergo that kind of briefing when they come on board. They'll have a handoff. It'll take a few days for it to happen, and then before long, you know, Sunny and Butch will be on their way back home with Nick and Alexander.
Yeah, we cannot wait. And I mean, so much of this, and just hearing you talk right now, it makes me wonder about the kinds of actual rescue missions that have to be planned for up there and contingencies. So what would happen if everyone on board had to abandon the space station? How many ships are there up there right now? How many astronauts can fit in one? And do there always need to be enough escape seats at all times?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, that's one of the critical things of the International Space Station. It has a lot of volume on the inside, you know, somewhere on the order of about the size of a 747. So internal volume is pretty large. But you want to make sure that there are enough seats to be able to get everybody off a space station. In the event that you happen to run into a problem on space station, whether it's a depressurization of the modules or you have some sort of toxic contamination inside the vehicle, or, you know, heaven forbid that you have some sort of catastrophic failure that occurs that, basically says everybody's going to go home. They go through training. And they practice where they need to head to, because obviously the vehicles are located in different locations, different docking compartments throughout the space station. So everybody has their plan. And that's part of this handover, is that everyone gets an opportunity to go through it so that in the event that an emergency does happen, there's no question about, who's going to be going where and what needs to be accounted for and who's going to be doing what.
A marvel of human engineering that we're looking at there on the screen. We thank you so very much for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you tomorrow as well. Thank you. And U.S. markets are striking back today after days of red. Let's take a look here. Here it is. Some relief on Wall Street. Yep. The day ending in some green. The Dow still slightly in the red, closing a little bit on the lower end. But the NASDAQ and the S&P 500, those are both in the green. And this is a big deal because just this last Monday, the NASDAQ saw its worst day since 2022. So what is going on? Well, today, there was a better-than-expected inflation report, which came out showing prices slowing down a little bit there, something the markets really needed because on this tariff front, the tariff war, the trade war, it has now gone full global with Trump's 25% tariff on all steel and all aluminum imports kicking in today. Canada and Europe are already hitting back as well. Canada imposing tariffs on more than $20 billion worth of American goods, things like steel, aluminum, but also computers, sporting goods, that kind of stuff. And the EU is slapping tariffs as well on things like American beef, whiskey, even motorcycles. And those will start April 1st. And we've got a panel here to break it all down. NBC senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez is across the northern border in Canada. And also with us, Caleb Silver, editor-in-chief at Investopedia. Caleb, let's start with the market report today. Is this sustainable or is this a fluke because of the better-than-expected inflation report?
I think it's a little bit of the better-than-expected inflation news, but also the market has been sold off for the past couple of days, past couple of weeks. So maybe we got to oversold. There were more buyers than sellers, but the push-pull on tariffs has really caused a lot of confusion and investor sentiment. You saw markets open higher today, and then some of them closed lower by the end of the day. So that just tells you the conviction is not really there.
And Gabe, you're actually in Canada right now. What are people saying out there about what feels like a very frosty air over U.S.-Canada relations?
Oh, hey there, Gadi. Well, it is freezing both literally and figuratively here. We've been speaking with businesses here in Canada, and there's a town several hours from here, Drummondville, and that town, about 18% of the jobs there are linked to the U.S. It's a huge manufacturing town, and we spoke with a metal processing company there, and they're furious. They just don't understand what the American government is doing at this point. We also spoke with an official with the mayor's office. Listen to what he said.
I can't stress it enough that it's not benefiting anybody. Everybody's losing, and especially Americans, because in the end, tariffs, who are going to pay for tariffs? It's not President Trump. It's not Prime Minister Trudeau or Prime Minister Carney now. It's American consumers and Canadian consumers. So nobody's winning in this.
Now, Gadi, Secretary of State Marco Rubio arrived here in Canada today. He is set to attend the G7 foreign ministers meeting here in Charlevoix tomorrow, and tariffs will be top of mind. Something we've been talking about with residents here. What makes them most furious is this idea of the U.S. potentially annexing Canada, making it the 51st state. Rubio says that won't come up at tomorrow's G7 meeting.
And Caleb, turning to you for just a second, talking about steel and aluminum imports, those are pretty far down on the supply chain list. In a global scenario, how long does it start to take to feel those effects, and where are we going to see the worst of the pain?
Yeah, well, we manufacture a lot of steel and aluminum here in this country as well, but we do import a lot of that smoldered aluminum from Canada, and that impacts car and car manufacturing. Just take the F-150, one of the most popular vehicles in the United States and in Canada. A lot of that is aluminum and steel based. So you'll see prices hit the automakers first. You'll feel that in the price of vehicles. Auto manufacturers have already told us those higher prices are coming, and they can't get away from them because they rely so much on aluminum and steel. But also the other imports coming in from Canada and the retaliatory tariffs are going to make everything more expensive for everybody.
And Gabe, Trump supporters are saying we saw a very clear backing down over from Canada yesterday over the power issue. Is that momentum the White House is feeling as well, or is there a different reality out here?
Well, President Trump is doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on this idea of tariffs. And you're right, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick essentially took a victory lap today, saying that the Ontario Premier that had threatened those tariffs on electricity to 3 U.S. states, he backed down yesterday when the president got involved. And the White House is touting that and, again, reiterating its desire on even more tariffs. Listen to what the president said in the Oval Office today.
We're going to be doing reciprocal tariffs. So whatever they charge us, we're charging them. Nobody can complain about that. Whatever it is, it doesn't even matter what it is. If they charge us 25 or 20% or 10% or 2% or 200%, then that's what we're charging them.
At least publicly, White House officials say they're not spooked by the market. It's at that point. Something else that President Trump said today, he's also considering tariffs on European cars that are imported to the United States. Now, to deal with all this, Canadian officials plan to travel to Washington tomorrow to try and hash all this out with the Commerce Secretary. Gadi.
And we'll see how all that goes. Gabe Gutierrez out there in Canada. Hopefully you get warm soon. And Caleb Silver, editor-in-chief at Investopedia. Thanks so much for joining us. Meanwhile, here in California, we are keeping an eye on a major storm that is dumping rain from the Bay Area down to San Diego. We've got evacuation warnings going in place here in Los Angeles for areas still recovering from January's deadly wildfires and the storms that have struck since then. Now, parts of Pacific Coast Highway are already shut down. Areas near there are still covered in mud from last month's storm. There are sandbags, barriers, and tarps in place to fend off any potential debris and mud in burn scar areas. But city leaders are still urging people to be extra careful over the next few days and into tonight. And NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns joins us now with a very, very colorful looking map there. What are we on the lookout for heading into tonight, Bill?
Yeah, brief periods of very heavy rain through the middle of the night. And if it falls on a burn scar area, debris and mud flows are likely. That's the scary part of this evening. And it's in the middle of the night, so we're really not going to know how bad it is until the sun comes up tomorrow morning. We've had torrential rain from San Francisco to Sacramento. Santa Cruz was under a severe thunderstorm warning earlier. We've had strong gusty winds. This will eventually make its way down into Southern California as we go throughout the overnight hours. And because we have so many burn scars out there, and it's going to rain so hard so quickly, that's why we got the 21 million people under flood watches. The higher terrain, as you'd expect, could pick up to about 3 inches locally, but it's those burn scar areas that we're most concerned with if we get that high rate of rainfall. So this is at midnight tonight, and I paused it right when our computers are showing us the heaviest rain from Malibu over towards where the Palisades fire was. It's only going to last maybe from midnight to maybe 1 or 2 a.m. Once we get past that, the rain will be much lighter. I paused it over here near Altadena, the Eaton fire. That's about 2 a.m.-ish. That's when the heaviest will be over you. By the time the sun comes up and everyone heads out, it's just about over with. So at 8 a.m., a little bit to the east side of L.A. and down towards San Diego, we'll still have rain. But the big fires, burn scars, it'll be done with. So we'll know by the time the sun comes up if we have to deal with, blocked roads or highways because of mud or debris. And Gadi, this is not as much rain as the last time. So our fingers are crossed that, we should be okay. We had a couple minor problems a couple weeks ago. Hopefully it won't be any worse this time around.
Yeah, fingers crossed, but that timing, it seems pretty dangerous there. Yeah. And I know this system isn't just going to impact us here in California. Who else is going to be at risk down the road here?
Yeah, this is a classic coast-to-coast storm, so let's take you through the weekend. So this is as we go through Friday. Late in the evening, we're going to see severe weather, then maybe even a tornado outbreak by the time we get to Saturday. And we're targeting the deep south areas from Mississippi, Alabama into Tennessee, maybe even a little bit of North Georgia. Then on Sunday, this whole mess makes it to the East Coast. More damaging wind threat along I-95 here. It's going to be warm, it's going to be windy, and those storms will race through. So this is Friday night. And this is more after the sun sets towards midnight into Saturday morning. but St. Louis, Nashville included in this too, Memphis, all the way down through Jackson into Birmingham. And then if we're going to get tornadoes or maybe an outbreak, we're going to have to watch this area Saturday, Gadi, especially all of our friends here in Alabama. It's that time of year we've really flipped a switch. I don't foresee us talking much about snow anymore. Now it looks like we're heading into severe weather season.
Sure does. Bill Cairns, thank you. And here are some other headlines that we're watching tonight. The Trump administration has filed documents to deport a legal permanent resident of the United States. We are talking about Columbia University graduate Mahmoud Khalil, who played a major role in pro-Palestinian protests at the school. Today in court, the government cited a little-known provision that would give Secretary of State Marco Rubio the power to deport Khalil. Because he has a green card, only an immigration judge will get the final say. Immigration officials won't say when Khalil's immigration hearing will be held, but a notice from DHS obtained by NBC News shows the hearing looks like it's scheduled for March 27th. And take a look at this. This is a semi-truck hanging over an overpass near Chicago this afternoon. Fortunately, no one was hurt there, but several lanes of traffic were closed. That truck spilled a bunch of salt onto the road below, which crews had to clean up. And an Indiana woman spent 6 days trapped in her car before she was found alive. Apparently, she fell asleep behind the wheel and crashed last Thursday. Her mom says she managed to survive by dipping her hoodie into a nearby creek and sucking on it for water. She broke both legs, several ribs, and an arm, but she's expected to be okay. And the government could be shutting down after all, as Senate Democrats today say they have rejected the GOP funding bill. Now, remember, that bill passed the House yesterday, basically along party lines. And Democrat leader Chuck Schumer is saying that if Dems don't support it, Republicans in the Senate won't have enough votes for it to pass. That shutdown deadline is looming for Friday at midnight. And some explorers found a long-lost sunken ship in Lake Superior. You can see it there at the bottom of the lake. This was one of the first steel cargo ships to travel the Great Lakes. The Western Reserve, as it was called, actually sank on Lake Superior in 1892. 27 people were lost. Only one person survived. Sonar technology was used to find that wreckage. And don't go anywhere. We are just getting started. Up next, cashing in on migrant detentions. How some communities might be finding ways to capitalize on President Trump's migrant policy. Plus, a person of interest has been identified. We've got new details on the search to find a University of Pittsburgh student who went missing while on spring break. That's all ahead, so stay tuned. Hey, welcome back. Just a few hours ago, the federal government announced that all immigrant detention centers in the United States are at capacity, but there could be a solution that's already in the works. We learned that some communities are actually renting out their jail beds to ICE, and our friend Antonia Hilton went to a community in Ohio. Might just make millions off that contract.
This is what the cells look like. They're all the same.
In Ohio's Butler County Jail, Sheriff Richard Jones is eager to fill these cells.
Got a bed over here, little cabinet, sink.
Happy to provide a resource now that the Department of Homeland Security says its immigration detention centers are at capacity after ICE arrested 32,809 individuals since President Trump's inauguration.
Well, they have no jail space.
So they can't do mass deportations without sheriffs like you.
They need us, and we are willing to help. I shook hands with President Trump.
Right after Trump won the election in November, Jones contacted ICE and renegotiated a contract his jail had with the agency during the first Trump administration. Butler County now charges ICE for holding detainees, renting out its beds for a price per head, potentially bringing the county millions of dollars a year.
300 beds.
Yes, ma'am.
What are you charging?
As much as I can get. We're charging $68 a day, and that pays for my employees, pays for what they need.
Tack on another $36 per hour for transportation.
Is it about the money?
No, it's about doing the right thing. If you look at what these people, the crimes that they have committed since they've been here, what's it worth for somebody that's been murdered or somebody that's been raped?
Saidu So says he accidentally missed a court appointment that led to a deportation order in 2006. For years, his family sought to keep him in the U.S., but in 2016, he was convicted of a crime following a car collision. In 2018, ICE brought him to Sheriff Jones's jail in Butler County. He now lives in the Ivory Coast, separated from his daughter, a U.S. citizen.
Butler County, I'm still going through some trauma from Butler County.
He alleges staff at the jail beat another detainee until blood surrounded his cell. What are you worried could happen to other people like you there?
Somebody's going to put hands on them. They will be beat up.
How often do you still live with the memories, the feelings that you experienced there?
I was having anxieties and it was coming back. The reality was starting to kick in. Like, I'd be hearing the doors shutting, noise while I'm in the house. I think I'm still in jail for a little bit, but now it's getting a little better.
In a lawsuit filed in 2020 and still pending, other detainees shared experiences similar to So's. The sheriff's office denies all allegations, saying our staff are trained professionals and would not beat anyone. Jones has been reelected in this community 6 times, and for most of those years has had this sign right in front of his jail.
That's the legal designation. Illegal aliens. That's where they're at. So now.
Right, but it's not an amusement park. Is it dehumanizing to have this here for people to just gawk and stare?
I don't see anybody gawking.
Back in the migrant detention business, he's confident his Ohio community is with him. Antonia Hilton, NBC News, Hamilton, Ohio.
Antonio, thank you for that reporting. Just yesterday, we told you about those massive layoffs at the Department of Education. The department is saying it will cut half of its entire workforce, and now schools across the country are starting to brace themselves for impact. One of them is Englewood, New Jersey, where NBC News correspondent Sam Brock is tonight with more on what's at stake. Sam?
In the halls of this New Jersey high school, echoes of uncertainty.
When you heard about the promise to dismantle the Department of Education, or at least reduce it in the name of efficiency, did that sound like a good idea to you, or were you concerned?
Very concerned. Very concerned.
Superintendent of Englewood Public Schools, Dr. Marnie Hazelton, walking us through the places where her students, faculty, and staff would feel any potential cuts first.
So we'll go in here. Are you anticipating impacts right away in the classroom?
Absolutely. We've already gone through the first wave of cuts a few weeks ago. Our funding for reimbursement for Medicaid, which is part of our IDEA, we saw that reduced from $280,000 down to $28,000.
A 90% cut in that money right away.
Absolutely, yes.
In the middle of the school year.
Yes. The services provided through Medicaid went to support our most fragile students, providing occupational therapy, mental health services, physical therapy.
President Trump has said he wants to shift control of education to the states. In 2021, right around 11% of school funding came from federal sources, according to the National Center for Education Statistics. The other almost 90% from state and local avenues. But Dr. Hazelton says every dollar in her district's budget is critical.
For every $100,000 in funding that you lose, what does that mean for a teacher or staff?
For every $100,000 that we lose, that is the equivalent of one teacher, one full-time teacher, including their benefits.
Another fear, the possibility the school could lose reimbursements for free meals that roughly 80% of their students qualify for.
For some of our most fragile students,
I'll follow
this is the only place where they get a hot, nutritious breakfast and lunch. We were so concerned that we partnered with our local grocery store to open a food pantry. We have a food pantry here where we distribute meals once every 2 weeks.
Hearing that the USDA recently just cut $1 billion of assistance for schools nationwide in terms of accessing fresh food from farmers and other sources, $1 billion. Does that give you pause for thought?
Absolutely. If children are hungry, they cannot learn. And if we are going to rely on highly processed food versus fresh fruits and vegetables, that is alarming.
Dr. Hazelton says she may need to make the difficult decision to cut sports and arts programs, which she says are the reasons many students look forward to coming to school.
What do you think the impact on the arts could be from these cuts?
Well, the first priority is always staffing classrooms. The priority is English, language arts, and math and science. So we would start to look at programs, our after-school programs, which include the arts.
A nearly impossible conundrum for school administrators, balancing basic services and those that can shape an entire high school experience.
Some of the students featured in the play, I didn't even realize they were musically inclined until they shared with me, I'm going to be in the musical. I didn't know you were into musicals. And you have to provide students that outlet and the opportunity.
Sam Brock reporting there. And coming up, the remaining hostages were just rescued from a hijacked train in Pakistan. The details are wild. You're going to want to see that. But first, you got to see this. At an Australian high school, there's a boulder. It's just been sitting there out front. It's been there for about 20 years, and a scientist just discovered that rock has 66 fossilized footprints from about 200 million years ago. Those three-toed footprints belong to these guys, and the scientist thinks that slab of rock might have been part of a waterway or passage collecting all those footprints. Quite the high school stomping ground, I guess. We'll be right back. Hey, welcome back. In Pakistan, some relief in an absolute terror of a situation. The country's military is now saying that they have freed the remaining passengers from that train that was hijacked by a militant group earlier this week, but not before over 100 people were killed. NBC's Raf Sanchez has more on how that dramatic rescue played out.
This handout video from a Pakistani separatist group appears to show the moment militants blew up a railway track in southwestern Pakistan before opening fire on a passenger train. You see here people gathering by the train's side before hundreds were taken hostage, according to Pakistani security officials, triggering a dramatic rescue operation. This passenger says everyone was crying, passengers shouting, the sound of gunfire everywhere. The train traveling from Quetta to the northern city of Peshawar was attacked Tuesday, killing 11 people. More than 400 passengers were on board, including 214 soldiers and security personnel, according to the Pakistani army. The insurgents, armed with rockets, grenades, and guns, separated law enforcement personnel and began taking small groups of passengers hostage into the mountains, Pakistani officials say. Security forces then launched a daring and dangerous rescue operation, saying it freed over 300 passengers over the past 2 days. Militants wearing suicide vests surrounded hostages, using them as human shields, officials say. This man says, "We were told not to look back. I just kept walking without looking back to save my family's lives." The Baloch Liberation Army, an armed ethnic militant organization, took responsibility for the attack, using hostages to negotiate the release of Baloch political prisoners. After a 2-day standoff, Pakistani security forces said they killed all 50 assailants, but 21 hostages were killed during the operation. The Pakistani Prime Minister condemned the attack, calling it a cowardly act. The BLA is seeking independence for Baluchistan, an oil and mineral-rich province bordering Afghanistan and Iran. It's also home to the country's ethnic Baloch minority. The violence in Baluchistan has been surging since 2021, when U.S. forces withdrew from Afghanistan, allowing the Taliban to return to power. The provincial minister of Baluchistan saying it's a difficult time for the entire nation. Officials are trying their best to improve security. The BLA carries out frequent attacks against Pakistani security forces and has also attacked civilians in the past. But the train hijacking was a first of its kind. Today, an end to the latest violence in an ongoing battle. Raf Sanchez, NBC News.
Raf, thank you for that. And as hopes of a ceasefire in Ukraine grow, all eyes right now are on Russia. You see, Ukraine says it supports a 30-day ceasefire put forth by the Trump administration yesterday, which came about after a 7-hour meeting with Ukrainian officials in Saudi Arabia. And now it's going to be up to Russia to accept that deal. But will Vladimir Putin make concessions to get it done? Because remember, Russia took a pretty massive part of Ukraine here. They control all the highlighted red right here. There are still some contested areas, but this is Ukraine. This is all the area that Russia has already moved into. NBC's chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel reports from Ukraine.
President Zelensky today said he's not the obstacle to peace and that he is ready to immediately implement a 30-day ceasefire proposed by the U.S. if Russia does the same. I am very serious about it, and for me it is important to end the war, he said. I want the President of the United States to see it. I want Americans to see it and feel it. Zelensky also said Ukraine will sign a minerals deal President Trump has been pushing for. And President Trump seems to like what he's hearing, saying now it's up to Russia to accept or reject the ceasefire, adding a threat to Moscow.
I can do things financially that would be very bad for Russia. I don't want to do that because I want to get peace.
In exchange for what seems to be a more flexible Ukrainian approach, Trump also resumed intelligence sharing with Ukraine and the supply of American weapons. Both were suspended after that disastrous meeting in the Oval Office.
You're gambling with World War III.
When President Trump and Vice President Vance accused Zelensky of being unappreciative of American support and not being serious about peace. By unilaterally accepting the U.S. deal, Ukraine has now flipped the script. Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying the onus is squarely on Russia to prove it wants to end the war by agreeing to stop the guns and sit down for talks.
Here's what we'd like the world to look like in a few days. Neither side is shooting at each other. Not rockets, not missiles, not bullets, nothing.
President Putin so far hasn't commented on the ceasefire. Today, he visited his troops in Kursk, a part of Russia that Ukraine captured, but where Russian troops made major advances while American intelligence cooperation to Ukraine was suspended. The Kremlin said Russia is waiting to hear more details about the ceasefire.
We just need the rest, and that's it.
In Ukraine today, Vitaly Kim, governor of Mykolaiv, welcomed the potential pause, but said he sees no indication that Russia will stop attacking.
I think that 100% of Ukrainian people want the war to be ended.
The uncertainty and changing American position are weighing heavily on Ukrainians, who question if President Trump is on their side. Yuri, a construction worker, came to a memorial in Mykolaiv today to pay respects to his friend killed by Russian forces.
What do you think about President Trump and the way he's been dealing with Ukraine?
I can't say those words on camera. What I think about Trump, he says. It's like a young child's behavior. My 1-month-old daughter is acting better than Trump. Now, Ukrainians hope the world will see which country wants peace and which country wants to take pieces of its neighbor. The proposed ceasefire would not end the war, but it would give each side time to rest and negotiate or rearm.
Richard Engel, thank you. Okay, so yesterday was election day in Greenland, and people there flocked to the polls. Lines so long that polling stations stayed open way later than they were supposed to. And the winner, their center-right, their pro-business party, which, unlike here in the United States, that party is pretty openly anti-Trump. And here is why it's relevant.
We need Greenland for national security and even international security, and we're working with everybody involved to try and get it. But we need it really for international world security, and I think we're going to get it. One way or the other, we're going to get it.
Oh, remember, Greenland is a territory of Denmark, and about 57,000 people live there right now, which is as many people as you can fit into Dodger Stadium. And most of the people seem to be against the idea of Greenland being absorbed by the United States. Experts say they're more concerned about their own independence. Joining us now is Professor Rachel Lorna Johnstone from the University of Greenland. Thanks so much for being with us. So what drove people to the polls yesterday?
Well, there's been a lot of excitement in the polls. As always, when we have elections in Greenland, this one had to be held before April. That was the last date. It has to be held every 4 years. Turnout was really strong yesterday with over 70%, something I think Americans would be really delighted to see. It was up 5% from the last election, but there was also really bad weather last time. I mean, all the parties are campaigning on a number of issues. There's lots of domestic issues, like in any place. For example, access to healthcare and education. But there's always discussions about the ongoing relationship with Denmark, as well as interests that other powers might have regarding Greenland. And I'm sure you've heard a lot about that in the US.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, really bad weather. I don't even know what that would look like in Greenland. Here in the United States, though, those that take this seriously, this idea of Greenland in the United States, I mean, they talk a lot about the strategic importance of Greenland, given its proximity to Europe, shipping lanes opening up as the oceans start to warm. Why do you think that Trump wants Greenland so bad?
Well, the US and Greenland have had a strong relationship since the Second World War in terms of security and also in terms of investment and trade. More, I would say, with America as regards security. So in the Second World War, the Americans protected Greenland. They opened their first base. They had quite a number of military in Greenland because Denmark was occupied by the Nazis. So Denmark didn't have a functioning government. I mean, the opportunities today are both in terms of economic opportunities. Greenland has huge mining potential, which requires a lot of external investment to be realized. But it's also very important in terms of military security as the Arctic is opening up. We see a lot of power competition in the Arctic. A lot of countries are interested, and America sees it as part of its backyard per your Monroe Doctrine.
Mm-hmm. And I apologize to ask about this, but this is, way across the pond over here. The conversations that keep going back and forth are, well, the population is low. If you could just convince this many people to join, but realistically, is there anything that you think might convince Greenlanders to join the United States, or is that just never going to happen?
Well, I can't predict the future generations away. Certainly, there was one opinion poll conducted at the end of January jointly with a Danish and a Greenlandic newspaper, and it found that only 6% supported joining the United States compared with an 85% that were against, with 9% don't know. So certainly the opinion poll suggests there is no appetite for becoming a part of the United States in some form of territory or colony or stadium-free association. On the other hand, the leaders of all the parties that are in Parliament have just been voted in are supportive of increased cooperation, increasing security cooperation, and also encouraging more investment from American companies into Greenland. So I don't think anyone in Greenland is ruling out cooperation with the United States, as well as many other international parties. But I don't think there's much appetite to jump from being the colony of Denmark to becoming the colony of another country.
I really appreciate the Greenland reality check. Rachel, thanks for joining us. Now let's take a quick look around the world. An online influencer in Tokyo was stabbed to death while live streaming. Now, this happened right on the street in broad daylight. Police say the man charged with murder admitted to the attack, but says he didn't mean to kill her. And how is this for irony? A new 4-lane highway is being built through acres and acres of protected Amazon rainforest in order to ease traffic for an upcoming climate summit. That's what the Brazilian government says, and they are promoting the highway's sustainable credentials, but critics aren't buying it. The COP30 climate summit will take place in Brazil in November. Meanwhile, Portugal's government is on very shaky ground right now. For a while, Portugal's prime minister has been dealing with allegations of conflicts of interest. This led last week to a no-confidence vote, and his two biggest opposition groups voted against the government. So now Portugal is getting ready for its third general election in as many years. And the government of Saudi Arabia has bought Pokemon Go, the entire thing. And with it, probably the location data of more than 100 million users. The deal is worth just under $4 billion. And Pokemon Go is owned by an American company called Niantic. The question now becomes, what will a company owned by the Saudi Arabian Public Investment Fund do with all that data from the most popular AR video game of all time? And still to come, there is now a person of interest in the search for the college student who went missing during a spring break trip in the Dominican Republic. What we're learning tonight, that's coming up, so stay tuned. And turning now to a story we've been following, investigators have identified a person of interest in the search for the University of Pittsburgh student who went missing while on spring break in the Dominican Republic. NBC News correspondent Jesse Kirsch has the latest details.
Tonight, American authorities say there's now a person of interest in the search for missing U.S. college student Sudiksha Kunanki. And sources familiar with the investigation say it's this man,
There's concern about the statements that he's made, the inconsistencies on those statements, and that bothers us.
The sheriff's office in Loudoun County, Virginia, where Kunanki is from, saying a 22-year-old man has caught investigators' attention. He appears to have been the last person with Kunanki before she vanished from this Punta Cana beach. But the sheriff's office stresses this is not the same thing as a suspect, as this is not a criminal matter. It is still a missing person case. Dominican Republic authorities, who are leading the investigation, have neither confirmed nor denied there is a person of interest. The University of Pittsburgh student was last seen on surveillance video here more than 6 days ago at this resort on her spring break trip. Her disappearance around 4:15 a.m. Thursday, later sparking a massive search that has included a focus on the water. The Dominican Republic's National Police telling us they're studying where a body would drift if someone drowned.
We still hold out hope that she's around and that she may still be alive, and we're hoping that she, that we find her.
That sheriff's office says that 2 of its detectives are in Punta Cana supporting the FBI and adds that Kunanki's family is now back home in Virginia as her whereabouts remain uncertain. Back to you.
Jesse Kirsch, thank you. And here are some of the stories happening out west that we're following right now. Police say a skier has died at a Colorado resort after crashing into a light pole. Now, an investigation showed he was going pretty fast and lost control, but they don't think that man was intoxicated, or they don't suspect any foul play. Also in Colorado, 8 people were taken to the hospital after a fire in a Denver retirement community. Officials say more than 80 residents there had to be relocated to other places after the explosion inside the building and that inferno afterwards. Still no cause on what happened. And brothers Lyle and Eric Menendez will appear at separate parole hearings in June. California's Governor Gavin Newsom made that announcement on his podcast, and that'll be the final hearing in their bid for clemency. A group of experts will examine whether the brothers pose any danger to the public, and then the report will head to a judge for resentencing. And before we go, it is time for the future of everything. And with space high on our minds tonight, we're going to take a closer look at the future of the International Space Station. Former NASA astronaut Mike Massimino joins us next to talk all things ISS. And tonight on The Future of Everything, we're going to take a deep dive into the future of the ISS. But first, here are some of the headlines we're looking at in the world of tech. Move over Iron Man's arc reactor. A man from Australia has survived more than 100 days with an all-man-made heart implanted inside of his body. He eventually got it replaced with a human heart, but researchers are working on one that will be able to completely replace donor hearts in the near future. And sometimes you just got to take a big step back to see the big picture, and that is what NASA's aiming to do with its newest telescope, Sphere-X. Now, unlike some well-known telescopes like Hubble, this one will focus on drawing 3D maps of the universe, sweeping through more than 450 million galaxies every 6 months. Scientists say this $488 million project will help us better understand what happened right after the Big Bang and how galaxies formed and evolved. And finally, as SpaceX's Endurance Crew Dragon continues its journey to the International Space Station, tonight we are diving into the future of this beautiful, magnificent, miraculous feat of human engineering circling above us, where it has supported life in the deep vacuum of space for almost 25 years. Joining us now is former NASA astronaut and our friend, Mike Massimino. Mike, thanks so much for being with us. And all the talk of Butch and Sunny, we've neglected to talk more about the science that happens on the ISS. Remind us what's going on there on a daily basis.
Yeah, Gadi. It's pretty amazing laboratory that we've had up in the International Space Station up in low orbit. It first launched in 1998, and people have been there continuously since 2000. And the science that goes on is pretty amazing. They've done things on basic physics principles, how combustion works in space, research into new materials, how the human body reacts to space and to other things, pharmaceutical research. It really is quite the laboratory, and they're just getting to use it. I think as it's been intended to be used. It's been there for quite a while, but each time, each month, each year, they learn more and more about how they can use the space station for the good of everyone here on planet Earth.
And Mike, so the current plan is to bring it down in 2030, right? And there are people outside of SpaceX and Elon Musk who are saying, well, maybe we should bring it down even earlier, and that it's, I don't know, past its prime, or it's no longer contributing in a big way. And yet, like, the whole deorbit plan, like, why are we going to deorbit this thing? Why can't we just push it up further into space and, I don't know, let it be a museum for future astronauts?
I tell you, Gadi, sounds like a good idea to me, what you just said. I think that if it's still working and they're making more discoveries and learning how to use it more efficiently, and as long as it's working, I don't see why they would deorbit it. So I don't think that it's over yet. The plan is to at least use it until 2030. That might be when the funding starts to dry up as far as now goes, but there's no reason why, if it's working, either a commercial company could step in and pick up some of the operations, or we just want to keep it up there and continue to use it. I would find it hard to believe that if it's working well, everything's going well, that we would just stop using it. So I don't know if that situation has been written yet. We don't know how exactly it's gonna end.
Yeah, all these deorbiting plans, and I can't help but think of like that Tesla Roadster with somebody sitting in it just going out into our solar system. Meanwhile, what is beyond the International Space Station? Because when you start to look at some of the other space station plans there are, things get pretty exciting, right?
Yeah, certainly. I think what we've learned, what NASA has done, is basic research for the government, but also some commercial experiments, and companies have been involved, and that, I think, is what we're going to see to grow. I think NASA is going to set its sights on the return to the moon, the settling of the moon, and then onward to Mars. And that low Earth orbit, we've been there for 25 years now with people continuously. We know how to work there. Hand that information over, which they already have been doing, to commercial companies so they can utilize low Earth orbit and the space stations like the International Space Station for economic benefit. And I think that's what's going to happen. Those space stations are already being built. I think they will be launched in the next few years. And that's what we're going to see, I think, is that the operations in low Earth orbit on space stations being turned over to the private sector.
Oh, we can't wait to see those go up. Mike Massimino, thanks so much for being with us. And that's going to do it for us tonight. I'm Gadi Schwartz. We'll see you here tomorrow. Until then, though, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app, or follow us on social media.